especially with a guy like Josh Donaldson at third. But you're right, they got to do something because John Gimmons and Alex Anthopoulos, they might not be around for next season if this team isn't competitive at least in September.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later on as well as the Jays go again. Houston tonight, 8 p.m. Sportsnet 590 The Fan. It's Sportsnet. You can watch the whole thing. Boston, Seattle tonight. We go to Boston right now. Sorry, that's 10 p.m. on Sportsnet 1. Off to Boston now. Mr. Paul Kelly joins us, co-chair for the Collegiate and Professional Sports Group at Jackson and Lewis, a law firm in Boston, former executive director of the NHLPA. Hey, man, thanks.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Things crazy. How crazy is it in Boston right now if you're a Patriots fan? What are you reading in the papers there?
You know, you can't escape it. It's not just the front page of the sports page. It's the front page of all the newspapers. It dominates the airways and the local news, and it's the Brady Deflategate all the time.
So take us through then yesterday. We're all kind of up to speed. We've talked about it for the better part of the week. Yesterday, Tom Brady files his appeal through the NFLPA. They've asked for an independent person to hear the appeal. Roger Goodell has said, no, I'll be doing that. What happens now?
Well, now, you have, typically you have 10 days from the filing of the appeal to hold a hearing, although those hearings rarely get held within 10 days, but now you have a hearing. The hearing will basically consist of Brady and his representatives, probably his agent and his lawyer, and the NFL Players Association will have a representative there. The league will have a couple of its representatives. Runs a bit like an arbitration hearing or a less formal court hearing. You know, Brady and his folks can either, present arguments and allow the judge to decide it based on arguments. They also have the right to present some evidence and present testimony. My sense in this one that this will go for several days. You'll probably have some testimony. I would gather that they call Tom to testify and probably an expert or two. The NFL, can counter. It can bring back Mr. Wells to, respond to some of the things that he's done. And then Roger has a period of time to render a decision. Clearly the NFL Players Association is not happy about the fact that Mr. Goodell has decided to hear this appeal on his own. No sports union is pleased when the commissioner of the league decides to be the ultimate arbiter of these things. He's the fellow that hires the so-called independent investigator. The fellow that imposes the discipline works for him. He endorses it, publicly after it happens, and now he's handling the appeal. So it's hard for anybody on the sports players side of the equation to view that as independent or neutral. And I'm sure that'll be a big issue for Mr. Kessler.
Paul Kelly, co-chair for the Collegiate Professional Sports Group at Jackson Lewis law firm in Boston as well, former executive for the NHLPA, joins us to talk about Deflategate. Is there any way at all, considering the reputation Roger Goodell has after the Ray Lewis thing and after his after the Adrian Peterson thing and after kind of screwing those things up, is there any way at all that he takes this and says, okay, well, it's down to 2 games, it's down to 1 game, let's all go our ways and don't do it again?
I think he's in a no-win position because no matter what he does, there's going to be just an avalanche of criticism. If he drops it down to 2 games, which I frankly think is the likely result here, you're going to have a large swath of North America that are going to be unhappy with that. Those folks that aren't big Patriots fans and, believe that they ought to be knocked down a couple of pegs. If he upholds the sanction and keeps the 4 games in place, he's going to have turned a strong ally in Bob Kraft into an arch enemy, and that's going to be problematic for him. Maybe not in the short term, but I suspect in the long term. Kraft is a guy who wields a lot of power, and he has a lot of connections throughout the league. He's the fellow who, led the search for Goodell. He was his biggest supporter when he ran into the problems with Ray Rice, and I think Roger has bought himself a hole that he keeps digging deeper and deeper. Frankly, if I were he, I would have put this in the hands of, I would have found some, unimpeachable former senator or, former distinguished jurist or something to handle this appeal that because I think ultimately what we're doing here is we're headed to the courts. No matter what Roger decides, this is going to end up in a courtroom someplace in the United States.
Paul, is there any way that Brady's people can force the NFL to use a third party?
Under the CBA, the answer is no. I mean, Roger, this is collectively bargained, and the way that the CBA is worded, he has the right to hear these things on his own. He also has the right to select a different hearing officer. He's obviously made that election. They can raise the issue in the context of the hearing, and if they choose to appeal later, they can raise it in the courts. But no, they can't force him at this stage.
You know what I find interesting, going back to what you said about Kraft and Goodell as well, everybody, if you understand how the whole thing works, Roger Goodell is an employee of all the NFL owners, as they're all shareholders in the NFL. So Roger Goodell effectively, and it's interesting, it's kind of a bootstrap mentality where Roger Goodell says, okay, I'm going to find you, one of my employers, one of my strongest supporters. What does that do for the long-term, Roger Goodell's long-term employment aspects as the commissioner of the NFL?
Well, I think that's an issue. What I find the biggest disconnect of all is that you have a report which exonerates the owner and exonerates the coach as having no knowledge of any wrongdoing, and then you dock the team, the franchise, a first-round draft pick. Forget about the fine, because the fine's irrelevant. You put Brady on the sideline for a couple of games, and you probably made money, even if you're paying $1 million fine. So it's the loss of the first-round draft pick, but how you justify that after you've cleared the franchise, that is what I suspect Mr. Kraft is just irate about, particularly if you look at the Patriots roster, and they've done pretty well at picking at number 31 or 32 year after year. They come up with these guys that are the core of their lineup. Roger Goodell has a lot of very close allies across the ownership. Certainly there are owners who are kind of anti-Patriots and will support Goodell, but I think the Mara family and Jerry Jones in Dallas and Kraft in New England, there's a core who are the people